First of all, I just want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. My name is John Reyes with Social NetworX. And if you are not familiar with our company, the one thing that I'll let you know is we've been in the real estate space providing trainings to the real estate community for more than a decade now. And by way of us doing this for more than a decade, it's given us the opportunity to not just provide trainings, but I would say even more importantly, connect with so many top producing and impressive real estate agents. I've had the opportunity to connect with both Julio Arias from J&J Realtors, as well as Joseph Limo. And these are two gentlemen who are practitioners in this business that operate at an extremely high level. And in addition to that, attention to detail is second to none. I feel like when it comes to knowing the contract, understanding the RPA, these are some of the best in the business. Both Joe as well as Julio are in the position of being certified trainers with the California Association of Realtors when it comes to the contract. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over to these guys because they're taking over part 2 of our training. If you missed part 1, don't worry, you can have access to it. Everybody's going to be receiving a copy of the presentation as well, which Joe was so nice to graciously send on over yesterday. And I will tell you that this training is being brought to you by Easy Fundings, which is awesome. So without further ado, gentlemen, I'm going to pass it on over to you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. And again, John, it's our honor to be here with you. Julio, thank you for sharing the stage again today, bud. I think everyone just know yesterday was amazing. I know Julio and I absolutely loved it. Today might be a little different in the sense that we're probably going to pick up the pace because we have a lot to cover. John's going to be monitoring questions in the chat box, so feel free. John, if there's anything pertinent, don't ever hesitate to jump in, and otherwise we can always answer them towards the end.
Yeah, so with that being said, Joe, I just want to add, like Joe mentioned, feel free, put the comments in either Facebook or if you're on Zoom, put them in the chat box and we will make sure that we get to them.
Awesome. All right, let's Julio, you ready? Let's just go like wildfire.
Yes.
So we're gonna start where we left off yesterday. Okay, so we're back to the residential purchase agreement, page 3 at the very bottom, closing in possession. And again, we're going to fly a little bit more today. If there's some real need to dive in, we certainly will. But the reason why we wanted to address this part of the residential purchase agreement is mainly because if the seller is going to remain in the property for any period after closing, for a day and beyond, you're certainly going to want to make sure that you adjust 9B and that you also click the box where it says in C that the seller in possession addendum is added as well. Okay. Julio, any thoughts on that before we dive into the actual SIP?
No, go ahead and dive into it and then I can add my.
Absolutely. So in the SIP, and we're going to talk strategy because this is a really important thing for you guys to consider as you're working with your buyers right now, because we know there's a lot of sellers out there selling a home, buying another. Now, a lot of sellers love the idea of having one move. Like when we're talking convenience, that's a big thing for them. When you think about the coronavirus and the added risk of movement of an entire family, understand that for a seller, they're probably putting a lot more into the idea of having that single transition move. So this might be a great area for you to accentuate how your buyers can offer a value add to sellers. But I want to also point out in here, when you fill out this SIP form, you're essentially going to put in the duration of time that the seller will remain after. And let's say it's maybe 7 days, 10 days, and you're going to do it at no cost. There is a value add there. And a lot of people find it difficult to put in 0 where it has a dollar amount under 2A. What you do instead is, instead of trying to mark it per day, you click the box, and at that section, once you click the box, you can put in 0 as the dollar amount. So I just want to point that out as well. Julio, floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah, and so when it comes to the number of days, guys, this is one of those areas where, we kind of maybe not want to give it all up front. So we only offer 3. But in today's market, I find myself on any contingent purchase. So when I'm representing the buyer on the house that we're trying to purchase, so I'm representing the buyer and I know that seller's contingent, I'm giving 7 days. And the reason why I look at that, and I also sell the listing agent when I'm writing my offer on that, is saying, look, you and I both know the close due date is like a pregnancy due date. It could shift any day of the week at some point. And so I want to give your clients the calmness that when we close, even if it's a Monday, that they'll have one weekend. So I usually do 7 days or sooner for that reason, just in case we close on a Monday, they know they have till Sunday, or if we close midweek and they tell us, again, we're 7 days or sooner in case they don't need them all. So that's my 2 cents on this. Just a heads up, we're giving out 7 days. And, of course, when we're on the listing side, we're also asking for that. And I use that same approach to get that approved by the buyer. So.
And real quick, Julio, I'm sure this is true of you guys as well. Well, first of all, I'm going to tell you, I'm stealing the pregnancy due date thing. That's awesome. Thank you for that. That's a massive nugget for me. The other thing I'll share with you guys is this is a conversation that I'm having with my buyers, and I'm sure Julio is as well, at the time of our buyers consultation, because what I'm doing is I'm helping my clients to understand where they could stand out from the crowd. So we know in advance with my clients where they could add terms that are more favorable to a seller. So that way, when we get here, this isn't some big lengthy discussion. Well, we're trying to get an offer written and out, right? Because we got to be quick right now. So these are the kinds of conversations that you might want to consider having at the time of a buyer's consultation. Good there?
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so now we're going to get into page 4 of the RPA, statutory and other disclosures. And oh man, this alone could be a 2-part, 2-hour session. Okay, so for simplicity, what I want to make sure everyone's clear about is a couple of things. Number one, under 10A1, it spells out that the seller shall, within a certain period of time, which is actually interesting because it pushes forward under 14A. So I'm going to go over there real quick. Under 14A, the seller, unless something's changed, has 7 days to comply to provide the statutory disclosures, okay? Now, what's interesting here is that it states that if required, we're talking FLD, we're talking TDS, we're talking natural hazard disclosure, we're talking SPQ and or ESD, which is the exempt seller disclosure. These items that are required here under statutory disclosure, right here under 10A3, to waive them is prohibited by law. They must be provided, okay? Now, there's a lot going on here in the sense that you need to be clear as to what is required for the seller to properly disclose when it comes to the statutory disclosure. And then you have to understand how these things can fluctuate in your transaction. So first of all, I want to make sure everyone's clear. If the seller performs according to the contract, within 7 days, they're going to provide the information to your buyer. We also know that part of the buyer's due diligence contingency, which includes the review of these statutory disclosures, the reports like the NHD, title, prelim, you name it, plus their home inspection. Those 3 are kind of the trifecta of the buyer's due diligence contingency. Once the seller provides everything within 7 days, this buyer, unless changed, has 17 days to review, sign off, and essentially remove that contingency. So there's a 10-day window there. I like to point this out simply because if a seller takes extra time to deliver these items, I'm sure Julio would agree, it's probably a really smart idea to immediately draft up an extension of time addendum for that contingency to give yourself that normal 10-day window that you would normally have. Okay, we all know there's a lot of agents out there that for whatever reason don't have the disclosures ready to go on the listing side to deliver over to the buyer. On the other side of the coin, make sure that when you are on the listing side, you are ready to deliver reports, disclosures, and give access to the property. So that way you are not having to extend a buyer on the other side of the transaction, their contingency to get removed. Julio, anything on that part before we go forward?
No, I was all ears on that. Definitely good points.
Cool. And then what I want to really, go for it.
In the event that you don't extend, let's just say that you don't extend, does that 10-day period start the day that the actual documents are then provided, the disclosures are provided?
It's a great question. It actually, in the paragraph here, it does not give you a full 10 days. So I'm going to move forward really quick, and this is a really important one. Under 14B3, what this states is that the buyer shall deliver to seller a removal of the applicable contingency or cancellation. Now, if we move forward along, seller is responsible. Let's see, I'm sorry, hold on. When the seller is providing disclosure to the buyer, which includes the statutory disclosure, then the buyer has 5 days after delivery of any such items to either remove the contingency or cancel the agreement. So the answer to your question in a simpler format, John, is no, it doesn't give you 10 days. It gives you 5 days. Now, one really important thing here as we go back, what this also states is that when the buyer is delivered these items, either they have 3 days if they're delivered that information in person, or 5 days if it's sent by electronic email, for example. We all know right now, especially, no one's doing personal delivery, right? A seller's not going to show up and go, hey, here's the report I forgot to give you. So when it comes to electronic disclosure or items being provided, they have 5 days. Now, here's the important part about that 5-day period, or 3-day again if it's personally delivered. Even if your client removed their contingency and then the seller has to make a change to their TDS or has to make a change to their seller property questionnaire, guess what time clock just got restarted? It's the 5-day period in which your buyer has the opportunity to review and then make a decision. So this is one of the keys that I always like to point out when it comes to page 4 of the residential purchase agreement. Julio, feel free, man.
I'd just like to share one story real quick, just to kind of put this in perspective. Representing a buyer in Covina, not until the day before closing did the seller disclose that you cannot park on the street of Covina. I knew it. I'm glad he mentioned it because it made me think to remind my buyer. My buyer knew it, so everything was fine. But it just made me think for that moment, if my buyer didn't know it and that was a deal breaker, we'd have the right to get out of it the day before closing. So
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Absolutely. And the reason why we like to point these things out when it comes to the contract is because, you know, everyone's so worried about contingency removals, as we should be. We should have a hypersensitivity to it. That's how we protect our clients. But just know that this contract was written in a really intelligent way, where there are triggers where if, let's say, a seller or a listing agent intentionally wanted to produce leverage by having you remove contingencies and then later disclosing additional information that could be detrimental to the transaction, the contract's already considered that. And there are ways to navigate, as we can see here, as long as you understand that it's there for you and your buyer client. So the contract gives you that level of protection, but it's really important for you to understand how these things play out, because if you don't know it, you could get steamrolled. Julio, I'm sure you'd agree, there's a lot of listing agents out there that will try and steamroll a buyer and their buyer's agent if they don't know better.
Oh, for sure. And that's kind of why I'm always stressing with, you know, the mentees and people who are getting into this business, like, you got to know this contract. There's so much to it. It's so hard to take a deposit. And yet I hear about people getting it taken all the time, and I feel so bad for them.
Yeah, here's another tough one. Like, we see sometimes changes happen with title reports, NHD even. I've had that one time, which is really strange. I have no idea why something got updated literally with about 5 days from the time the report was originally created to an amended report. But those are the kinds of changes that can, you know, really cause issue when a buyer reviews them and there's something different going on. So just understand that this is there. It's a really important part of our contract. This is one of the main points that I think people aren't super clear about. And this is where we run into problems, right? Disclosure, contingency removals, what's the buyer's right might be if they have to cancel because of some pertinent information that wasn't provided before. Anything else on that one, Julio?
No.
Again, I think Julio and I could probably do a 2-hour session over 2 different days on this page alone, but we're just trying to hit the highlights for us today. Okay, condition of property. This one is so important. Where you see highlighted, it says, I'm going to move my my webinar bar. Unless otherwise agreed in writing, number 1, the property is sold as is in its present physical condition. That's such an important thing there. And I'll tell you why this can be a sticky matter. On the listing side, there may be times where we are trying to set a precedent with a buyer, where we have multiple offers and we're trying to kind of make sure we're moving forward with the buyer who's not going to try and get us into escrow and ask for a bunch of stuff, where we can put in verbiage that says something along the lines of buyer and seller agree, buyer is not going to, or seller is not going to consider any repairs nor credits for repairs. And both parties sign off. Even in that dynamic, I always help my seller understand all you're doing is trying to set a precedence. You're just trying to set an expectation. Because guess what? That's what the contract already reads. And does that mean that the buyer can't come and still ask for things? Of course it doesn't. The buyer's always going to have that right. So I also like this because when we receive that kind of verbiage on the buyer side, I calm my buyers down and give them that exact same message. It's fine. You can agree to that. But just because it's going to be sold as is, unless we already know everything in advance about that property, which I'm sure we don't because we don't have a home inspection done, that doesn't mean that we can't ask for items or credits once we get there. Julio, feel free.
No, I agree with everything you said. And then this just happened to me within this COVID time, where the person thought that because she wrote as is in the counter, that meant my contingencies were removed. And I'll take this a step further just so you guys can know why I'm so passionate about wanting to share this part. 2 weeks later, we have to cancel. Buyer's not happy with everything she found. When she called me to tell me that the scenario was a no contingency situation, I said, no, go ahead and take a look. We went through all the process. I get the RPA back to me with the added X in my contingencies being removed. So she went in after the fact, put the X on the no contingencies and sent that to me and tried to pull one over on me. So that's how bad it can get.
Yeah. And these are the ways in which, like, if you're not really reviewing what's out there, because I get it, like our contracts, we see them all the time. And so we kind of brush through things. You got to be very careful and hyper diligent about being thorough in review. And then second, just understanding what the real rights are and how this risk balanced contract works. So that way you make sure you don't put yourself in a bad position for yourself or your clients. Thank you for sharing that one, Julio.
Of course.
We good here? Any other thoughts on this part per se?
Just to add the part about little underneath it, it's 11 double I. So the property, including the pool, spa, and landscaping and grounds to be and maintained to the condition that you guys initially saw it. So when you're on the listing side, encourage your clients to keep the grass going, keep the pool cleaned, because how many times have we walked into the VP and it's nothing like what we saw. And that's just an area where we don't want to make the last day for both the seller or the buyer an inconvenience, or at the same time a bad experience because we didn't educate them in advance. So heads up, that's where you would find the as is in number 11, and a little bit about what exactly you should be educating your buyer and seller on what to expect on the last day.
Amazing point. And sometimes where we see that become an issue is when, let's say there's, for whatever reason, a need for an extension on a transaction, seller's upset, they've moved, and they're like, you know what, I'm just shutting everything down. Well, if they shut off the water, that could cause issue here. And even though they're upset and the buyer in their minds didn't perform the way that they should, that doesn't give you the right to breach contract here. So extremely good point. Thank you for bringing that one up, Julio.
No
All right, let's see here. Now we're getting into our time periods. I think we addressed most of this, which I think is super important here. Anything in here, Julio, because I know we've kind of went forward and covered it. Anything else that you want to address here when it comes to the time periods for contingencies?
I'll just reemphasize again for those of you guys, because this is the first contingency we're usually removing, is that this isn't a passive date, right? The day comes, day 17. Don't send me your request for repair on day 17 without the contingency removal. It'd be surprised how many times that happens. I know we all do it and we try to leverage it that way, but every time I send my request for repairs, even if it is close to day 17, if it is day 17, then I'm sending my CR with it. And surprisingly, I was on the end of it where I did that, and the listing agent called me and thought that she didn't have to respond, which I said, no, you didn't have to respond whether I sent the CR with it or not. I'm doing my good faith and having my client be in good faith as per the contract. And we're removing the contingency and letting you know this is our request. And we've done our inspections. Here are copies of everything. So heads up, guys, again, day 17 does not mean that's the day you send the request for repair and then hope that the agent, doesn't ask for the CR. Let's remember we're all on the same team here. And this is something you can still do. And the next contingency to worry about.
And then the last thing I'm going to make sure is clear for everybody is under 14B4. Okay. unless there's some kind of seller contingency in place that is, different, the way that this contract is written, you'll see at the end of that paragraph where it's highlighted, once the buyer's written removal of all contingencies is delivered to seller, seller may not cancel the agreement pursuant to paragraph 14D1. Now, does that mean that the seller can't cancel the agreement if the buyer doesn't perform? No. But if a seller gets a better offer or they want to try and pull a quick one, then the way the contract's written here anyway is that the contract cannot be canceled by the seller unless there's a different performance issue by the buyer. The reason I have a big caveat there is at the end of this, we're going to get into the CVA, and the CVA is going to change a bunch of things. If you're not familiar, it's a coronavirus addendum. Anything else on this one, Julio?
No.
Cool.
No.
Let's dive into the seller's right to cancel. All right. So the seller's right to cancel when it comes to buyer's contingencies and the buyer's contract obligation, really, unless there is a seller contingency added to this contract, the seller's ability to cancel is really based on the buyer's lack of performance. Okay. What's really important here to understand on both the listing side and the buyer side is that there is a process to this. You don't, as the listing agent, and it's good to know if you're on the buyer side, you don't get to up and go, you didn't remove contingencies, it's day 18, we're canceling. That's not the way this works. And if you're ever faced with a listing agent trying to steamroll you like that, and you need extra time for something, whatever it is, one of the greatest recommendations that I have for you is let them figure it out for themselves. I'm not here to educate a listing agent on how to protect their client. I'm here to protect my client in their best interest. If they don't know their own process to go about this, guess what? They're offering us extra time. So Julio, anything you want to add there?
No, completely agree. I'm glad you said those exact words. Let
Yep.
them figure it out for themselves. This is one of those moments where we just can't educate everybody.
That's right. So this is a really important part for you guys to understand, simply because we see this happen all the time, right? Maybe there's a loan contingency, or you're waiting for them to respond to a request for repair. I don't know, like some of these things can happen. And they're like, well, we want you to remove your contingency because it's day 18. And Julio just kind of recommended how he would approach it. And that's given if everything's working out the way it should. But what if it's not? And they're like, well, we're going to cancel you tomorrow if you don't do this. It's like, well, you haven't gone through the process yet. And this is where we start to talk about the process, right? So here it is. The notice to buyer or seller to perform. And essentially what it reads is one party, the party who needs to notify the non-performing party, needs to provide notice and offer them at least 2 days to remedy that issue, okay? Now, that's for performance during the contract. When it comes to close of escrow, then the notice that's really a demand to close needs to offer at least 3 days to remedy, which means you need to close escrow. Here's the interesting part about both of these, okay? You can deliver notice prior to the date that these items are due, all right? So for example, on day 15, you could send the notice to perform to remove contingencies on day 17, 2 days prior. You could, 3 days prior to closing escrow, deliver the demand to close escrow on time. Some people use that as strategy. I will tell you, I'm not in the business of canceling transactions. I'm in the business of finding solutions and moving forward. So I'm just going to tell you my perspective on this, and it may be different from Julio's, I don't know. I don't do that kind of stuff. I'm not here to try and, put us in positions where you do this or I'm canceling you. Simply for a couple of reasons. Number one, we don't want to freak out the buyer. Number two, although your seller may understand the strategy and play along, when things don't happen their way and they know they're now in a position to leverage that power, how do you know you still have control over them and that may be power hunger that they may want to actually go through and do it, when it was more to just call a bluff and make sure the buyer's performing. So I'm always very hesitant to do those kinds of things prior to the due dates. And I'm always looking for the path to wrap this thing up. Now, if it's not in my seller's interest to wrap it up, that's a different story. All decisions need to be based on your principle and what's good for them. Julio, floor is yours, my friend.
No, I completely agree. That's exactly what I was going to add, was the fact that, depending on your client's position, sending that notice to perform, if we're going to day 15 and the buyer's agent has just not communicated well, and, we haven't even heard about the appraisal, things like that, I'm trying to save my client from an additional 2 days after the 17 days of wasting time. And if that's the sense I'm getting, that's about the only time I want to send this notice to perform. All right.
I love it. And then here you're going to see under H, effective cancellation on deposits.
Yeah.
So go for it, Julio. Yeah, go for it, man.
I'd like to jump in with the quick on that story I mentioned a little earlier about the agent going back and checking the box on my RPA, which, just so you know, this is why, using the WIN forms to fill out your RPA is so important, because you see the blue X when you did it initially with the original offer. Well, her copy came back with a black pen X, or even a professional looking one, done on the computer, but it was black. That was the only thing that gave me the indication of why she was trying to be so aggressive with taking my client's deposit at that time. So that led to no communication other than me sending the CR and she sending me another CR that had, a deposit to be taken by the seller. We held off the 10 days, as you'll see here. Within 10 days after escrow holder's notice, we sent in the document into escrow, and we didn't hear anything from the other side. So then at the 10th day, I sent an email to escrow telling them to make that decision. And when I did that, I had put together, my wife Jeanette put a real detailed email together about what she did. And I think that gave the escrow that extra nudge to call that listing agent, because again, she was the listing side, so that she picked the escrow, and they called her and said, hey, you better sign this and have the seller sign it and move forward before these guys, really take you through the ringer. So just know, guys, that if you're in that position of where you do not have an agreement with the seller, there is this opportunity here to wait out the 10 days, have escrow make the decision. But again, I'm all about affiliates and vendors and having good relationships with them. In this case, it wasn't my escrow company, so I felt comfortable with at least sending a nicely worded email. Don't put your escrow companies in that position if you're on the side of the wrong. So.
Right. Yeah. And here's what's interesting. I mean, you'll notice here exactly what Julio's speaking to. It's right here. If within 10 days after escrow holder's notice, the other party does not object to the demand, escrow shall disperse funds or disperse the deposit to the party making the demand. Now, what's interesting at the very bottom of this paragraph is we're in bold. It says a party may be subject to a civil penalty up to $1,000 for refusal to sign a cancellation instruction if no good faith deposit dispute exists as to who's entitled to the deposit funds. So just know that it goes above and beyond just someone trying to play games or be a jerk, right? Because we know those things can happen when a cancellation happens, but maybe the seller's mad and they're going to try, even if you have all contingencies still in place, well, I'm not going to sign that thing. If you understand that this is there, this could be an opportunity for you to go to the listing agent and go, here's what maybe you need to go educate your seller on. You see this bottom part of that paragraph where it reads you could have a civil penalty. They're already upset that they're not moving forward on this transaction. They're going to be real upset if they realize they're going to have to pay us another $1,000 for their nonsense. Yep. So these are the ways in which when you are clear on your contract, you can get things done because it's there. Anything else on that, Julio?
No.
Cool. Let's keep going then here, guys. All right. Final verification of condition. This one is a big deal. Like there's a lot that we see here play out, and, real estate's interesting. Like a lot of people think that, there are if this, then that when it comes to a real estate transaction. And this is one of those areas where that's not the case. So in the paragraph 15 here, it says that the buyer is going to go do their final walkthrough, right, within 5 days prior to closing. But it immediately states in all caps, this is not a contingency of the sale. This is really an opportunity to confirm that the property was maintained pursuant to the paragraph that Julio mentioned prior, that the agreed repairs have been done, and essentially for the buyer to go in there and go, yeah, this is the home that I knew I was purchasing. But it's not a contingency of the sale. Now, Julio, when you walk into a final walkthrough, and there's something wrong, how might you handle it given that this is not a contingency of the sale?
Yeah, I'd like to add before I answer that, I also set the expectations of the buyer before walking into the home, telling them what the VP, what the final walkthrough means. This exact thing that, hey, it's not a contingency thing. This is more of we're paying attention to make sure that there's no new holes in the walls. Maybe, you know, they had a bad day, or making sure the ceiling fans are still present. That washer and dryer and refrigerator that we talked about being part of the deal is still present. So once I've done that walkthrough and if I find a problem, first thing I do is just give the agent a quick call, send them a quick text. Hey, here doing the final walkthrough, you have a minute. And, you know, kind of have that nice, you know, conversation with them. A lot of times you find out it was just a mistake, right? Either it's a big one, like the seller or the agent didn't pay attention to that, we checked the box, or, you know, it's just something where, again, something got slipped through the cracks. So I usually try to handle it that way. But I let my buyers know, again, before even calling the agent, what step 2 and 3 would be. And that would be sending over a document right away, and holding back funds is probably my first approach to see if I can get the agent to let the seller know that, hey, this is something that we agreed to, and we want to hold back funds in escrow in order to get this solved and still close. That's usually my first go-to. How about you?
Yeah, that's a great point. So it could be either holding back funds. It could be to try to not close.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason why that could be tricky, though, is because this is not a contingency of the sale, and the seller could start calling the buyer to the carpet because they're not performing to the contract. So it's all just depending on, oh, got some feedback there. John, if you wouldn't mind making sure some of the folks are muted, that would be awesome. But those are the ways in which you would try and approach managing those issues before there's a closing, simply because once you close, now the repercussion is probably going to be litigation if someone's not going to follow through. The good news is that's what the contract for, that's what all these agreements are for, is that there is a paper trail, and that there is a path to trying to remedy any issues, because when a seller agreed to something, and this contract is very clear on what is going to be left behind, what the property condition will be, whatever the sense is, and then it's not the case when they close, well, that is where you're going to have recourse. Okay, so again, it's not a contingency of the sale. You can try and stop escrow until these things are figured out. But if the seller wanted to be a jerk, or the agent, and start going towards calling the buyer to the carpet for not performing, just understand you don't have a leg to stand on there. So you may need to close and then leverage the recourse there after the closing to remedy the issue. Fair enough, Julio?
Fair enough. And I know we're all, you know, right now trying to hold on to every dollar, guys. But, you know, if you could afford to, you know, help between the agents, just get it figured out. I mean, you'd be surprised how many times I'm sending my clean out guy to these properties to get rid of the debris, and not even calling the listing agent in some cases, or at least making them aware of it so they know that the next time we come across each other's path, that this is how I work, just getting it done.
You know, and I'm going to speak to that very briefly, but the reason why that makes sense for you, Julio, is simply because you do such a great job with your clients that, you know, you're building roots with a new network of people. You're going to get repeat business. You're going to get referral business. So what I would encourage all agents is make sure that you are really good at connecting with the right people, doing business with people that can give you that repeat and referral, and then, of course, delivering. So that way they want to give you that extra business. It doesn't hurt so much, right? I have a property right now in Paris. I needed to credit $1,000. My sellers are furious. They've already moved. And they're giving me 2 listings as we speak. And they would never ask me for money. So for me, it's an easy thing. I'm going to cover this. I'm going to make sure it's taken care of, because that repeat and referral business is there already. So it's not that big of a problem anymore. When you come from that place of abundance, things are a lot easier. I'm not advocating for you guys to go give your commissions away all the time, okay? I'm not a big believer in that at all. In fact, my kind of mainstay on how I approach that, this is just my personal thing. If someone would never ask me for it, that's a candidate in my mind. If they would come to me immediately and start trying to talk about my compensation, then usually, and I've done this before, my response is absolutely, we can have that conversation as long as you're ready to turn around and share with me how you're going to add me to your payroll as well. And that's a tough conversation to have. But usually, if someone is not the type to come to me and ask me for money, that's a candidate in my mind. So just wanted to throw that out there. I don't want anyone to think that me and Julio are saying, yeah, just throw your commissions all around and cover everything. That's not the case. But sometimes there are small bridges to gap. And this is where we can have massive impact. And if you're running a business that feeds you repeat and referral, it doesn't hurt that much at all. So just wanted to put that out there. Cool. All right. Really quick, when it comes to liquidated damages clause and the arbitration of disputes, the only reason I have this on here is just so that everyone's clear. If one set or one party agrees to it and the other doesn't on the contract, then what you have is a contract that has not been fully executed. Either both parties have to agree or both parties have to not agree to these two paragraphs. Simple as that. I'm not going to dive into the nuance. I think most people know that. Okay. Expiration of offer. Now, if nothing has changed, the way that this offer is pre-written is that this offer will expire by 5 p.m. on the third day from when it's submitted, okay? Now, how do you calculate the days? Easy. Whenever something is either signed or delivered, that's day 0, okay? Then 1, 2, 3. Now, the reason why expiration of offer is important is because I have recently heard of litigation that I was not a party to. This was from a car attorney, that a seller was able to cancel a contract a week before closing on a buyer based on the premise that when that seller actually went to sign that agreement, it was beyond the 3 days. I believe it was 5 days instead of 3. And so that seller in litigation, I don't know if it was arbitration or court, I'm not sure, but they were able to win the argument that that contract was never valid because it expired before he signed it. Now, I put this out there because right now, especially, how often are we seeing responses take a while? Okay. Now, if a seller responds to your buyer 5 days later, 4 days later, 10 days later, and you guys are like, yes, we're going to get that property, great. But the immediate thing that you're going to want to do is create an addendum and essentially say expiration of offer is extended until, and you can put a date or you can put until both parties consummate contract. Whatever it is, you need to extend the expiration of offer so that it meets when that offer actually was signed by the seller, just so you don't run into a problem like that. Julio, any other thoughts or issues you've seen there?
No, not at all. Actually, I think we got the same car legal person on the phone because I heard.
Oh,
this.
Is that right? Cool. Yeah. And hey, you're going to see that at the end, but I'm going to just speak to it immediately. One of the reasons why I've built a level of confidence on this contract, and Julio and I agree on this because we've had this conversation before, is that we consistently reach out to CAR, the attorneys there, even if it's not a problem yet, because again, we're playing chess, not checkers, right? I'm not calling them when there's a problem and people are talking lawsuit and then I'm picking up the phone. I'm doing it when I'm starting to see issues brew. And I want to understand, how am I moving my chess pieces accordingly to protect my client and to manage the deal at the same time? So we encourage you guys, and Julio, feel free to jump in on this, but we encourage you guys to get in a habit of calling CAR. Call those attorneys. That's what they're there for. They are going to help you understand not only the contract, but how it plays out in litigation. We started yesterday by kind of discussing the contract is black and white minus the blue parts, but real estate is shades of gray. So the better you understand how those shades work when it comes to legal issues thereafter, the stronger you're going to be in navigating this thing. Julio, anything you want to add there?
No, agree.
Cool. One last thing, confirmation of acceptance. If there's no counter and your clients are on the listing side are going to sign it, make sure they have, the seller signed it when your buyer receives it back. Make sure they sign off on the confirmation of contract. It can also be by the buyer's agent as well, but just make sure that part's done. We see that get missed a lot, and it's, just things that we're chasing during the transaction. And make sure you sign your offer on page 10 as the buyer's agent. Julio talked a lot yesterday about how do I fill out the person on the other side of the deal? I would imagine, Julio, this is an easy one to find, right?
Correct.
Yep.
I mean, come on.
Yeah. I mean, sign your own offer. That would help someone to see that you know what you're doing. And then, of course, the final one is have your buyer initial the bottom of page 10. I see that a lot too, just recently. Julio, anything else here?
No, that's it.
Cool. We're trying to push through to get to the goods, and I think we have landed. So Julio, here is the coronavirus addendum. We wanted to make sure we got here today simply because this is new. There's a lot to this. And if you understand how to navigate this, you may understand when you want it to be included in a contract and when you don't want it to be included in a contract. So Julio, I'll let you kind of kick off this one and then we can dive in together.
Sure. So again, like as you mentioned and ended there with when you want it to be included and when you don't want it to be included. Well, right now we're in, as they say, unprecedented times, right? We don't know what's happening tomorrow, and we're really just not sure when we should use this, because it kind of on both sides hurts us and at the same time protects us. As a selling side, when you're on representing the seller, your first thoughts when you see this are, I don't know if I want to agree to this, because you're basically giving your the buyer an opportunity to use this. And of course, we're all hoping that these things are being used in good faith, but use it to get out of the contract if in fact they are affected directly, work related, themselves, personally, family, just kind of anything that's on a right at a home front, to get out of the contract, to cancel. And so that's my first thought on the listing side. However, I actually accepted it on one that just recently canceled because we were contingent as well on our purchase, right? And it turns out my client in the middle ended up being affected. Job hours were reduced, and it even led towards them being laid off. And because we had this in play, we were able to use it as a reason for my sellers canceling on both. And so that's kind of where I, by wrapping all this up, that's kind of where I found myself realizing, like, this is really a gamble each and every time. But I would probably side on the part, I will side on the part of protecting my client when I'm in that situation. When it comes to the buyer side, again, this is why it's so important to have the conversations of the buyer consultations, to find out not only, hey, where are you currently living right now? What's your situation? Are you renting? Are you living with family? Because that's on the possession day, the importance of possession day and setting that expectations, but also talking about this job. I'm not going to assume that my lender, went so deep to find out whether or not they're in any kind of, in red or in any kind of concern of them losing their job in the near future. But ask questions about their job, ask them about the hours that they're currently receiving, and make them aware of this form and let them know that, hey, not all agents work this way, but if we fill out this form and you want to protect yourself, I want you to also know it may get looked at as a contingency that can scare the seller a little bit. And again, just lay that on very thick and make sure you're very clear with them about it, because again, I always want to protect my client, but if they're the ones saying, no, Julio, been at my job for 20 years and, I'm actually super busy, and all the different things they can say, and you can get them to be comfortable with it, then, I'm not adding it to my offer.
Yeah, and let's kind of dive into a couple of pieces of this thing. So under number one, basically what this thing spells out is, obviously because of our pandemic, there's a lot of unforeseen issues. And then it gets here where it says, well, the agreement, meaning the purchase agreement, allocates risks, right? Meaning for both parties by the way of contingencies, disclosures, covenants, you name it. It does not address any of these unforeseen issues because of the coronavirus. Now, what this is saying under party or the portion one is, well, that when these parties agree to this document, they're going to have some protection to issues that could come up that were unanticipated, okay, that really they had no control over. Now, what's interesting is under, and then two kind of spells out a little bit more, but under 3 here, what you're going to notice is under 3A, it says that this document or this CVA is not integrated into the contract unless both parties agree to it. So if both parties don't sign it, it doesn't count. Okay. So if you on the buyer side present it to the seller and they don't agree to it and don't sign it, don't think that you have that protection. It's spelled out here that unless both parties agree, it's not a part of the contract. Okay. Now, what this basically does though, is that it kind of puts into play that both parties agree that if any unforeseen circumstances come about, due to the coronavirus specifically, that by leveraging the notice of unforeseen coronavirus circumstance, also known as the NUCC, that when you implement that into the contract, both parties are going to agree to do a couple of things, either A, extend, B, cancel, and, you know, kind of relieve the other of any repercussions thereafter. That's what this document in a very generic sense states, okay? I'll also make sure that you guys see here in bold, the parties are advised to seek legal counsel from a qualified California real estate attorney, and it's specific to what happens if it's this issue. Does that count? We shouldn't be answering that. That really should be counsel from a qualified attorney for real estate. So that's what this thing looks like. So when you first fill this out and present it in a contract or in a transaction, you're not filling out anything for sections 4 and 5, okay, initially. Now, if some issue comes about, this gets represented again with the NUCC, and you're usually checking under 3B and letting them know there's a problem, okay? Any thoughts or anything you want to add in here?
No, I just checking that box up near the top, if you wouldn't mind pointing at it and mentioning that's where if we were sending it initially with the offer.
Yep. Because this could be a time of offer. It could be when you're signing disclosures and want to present it. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it. I think, Julio, you and I would agree, if you want this implemented into a transaction, your best bet is to do it at the same time when everyone is agreeing at the time of contract, okay?
100%.
Now, if you really want it integrated on the buy side and you're trying to figure out a leverage point for the seller to have an openness to signing this thing, the best thing you can do is just point out that this is providing cover for the seller as well, okay? One other thing I'll kind of note is that when my client is selling a home, right? So they're a seller on this end and they're a buyer on this side. Julio's already made mention how this was an important document to cancel 2 transactions at once because of an issue. If my client is selling a home and that's solid and they're buying, I know for sure I want to make sure it's on the home that they're buying. I want to make sure that that's an integrated addenda there, simply because if anything happens to the transaction they're in where the buyer cannot perform, then we should be able to call this to the carpet unless it's some issue that is non-coronavirus related, okay? Any other thoughts there, or we're good?
We're good.
Okay, so let's go to the second part of this. And again, this is usually what is presented when there's an actual issue, okay? And then you can essentially go towards whether or not you're asking for an extension of time addendum, and that could be on contingencies or on closing, or if you want to just have an immediate mutual cancellation due to some unforeseen coronavirus issue, okay? Anything else in here, Julio, that you want to touch on? I don't want to, get into too much of the legal aspects of this for a few reasons. Number one, this is new to us. I don't have a lot of, litigation from this to speak with, whereas on the contract, we have plenty, right? So just know this is what it looks like. This is how you would navigate this document. Now let's look at the actual NUCC. So this is assuming that there's an actual problem going on, okay? Actually, you know what? I want to go one step back. I apologize. There's one thing I wanted to touch on. Okay. Under 3A, I wanted to touch on this part. The NUCC, because we're going to get there now, shall identify not only the issue, but it'll also provide verification that it was an unforeseen coronavirus circumstance which impacts these person's ability to perform, buyer or seller. Okay, so let's go into the NUCC, because just know a lot of people are trying to leverage this now. Like any issue comes up like, oh, well, I'm just going to call it coronavirus. That's the problem. If you don't understand that this initial CVA calls for the NUCC not only to identify an issue, but then provide verification of that issue as well. So in the NUCC, basically what you're going to do here is spell out what the problem is, provide any additional explanation. And then right here it says under 2, verification of the issue, or if checked, documentation to support. Okay. So this thing's interesting because it's almost unilateral. What it basically does is it says, these are the problems, here's the issue, here's the proof, and send that in. It's actually the CVA, which at the bottom spells out what the action will be because of the issue. And I want to make sure everyone's clear on what that looks like. Okay. So the NUCC doesn't get signed off by the other party. It's the CVA that both parties would agree to again once an NUCC has been presented and showing proof that there's an issue. Then both parties will agree to the remedy due to those issues, extending contingencies, extending the close of escrow, or a mutual cancellation. Cool?
Yeah. What would be your call if they send you one of these and they send you a copy of a letter from the person's work saying that they have 3 to 7 days off due to them being in contact with, not positive, just in contact or in the realm of with somebody with the positive test?
You know, I think my question would have to do with, let's talk about, because I mean, people can say a whole bunch of stuff. My question is, how does that impact the financing? Because it's all about performance. Like, you know, I could be off for 3 months straight and it may not affect my ability to buy. So yes, I think it really comes down to, okay, a letter is one thing. Now hey lender, with this letter in play, be it that this is the case, how does that affect their ability to purchase the home?
Agree.
That's just my thought.
Yeah, agree. And I kind of, you know, at this moment, these times, you kind of want to be the nice guy all the time, but I still had to ask the question, like, okay, so it's talking about 5 to 7 days off. What exactly are you? But I think they just had cold feet, you know, and they were just doing it that way when they could have just been honest with me and said, you know, we kind of want to back out, but just a thought.
Yeah, we're just looking for a way at this point. Yes. So again, I want to make sure everyone's clear when it comes to the coronavirus addendum. There is extra protection for both parties. Could be good, could be bad. That's up to you and your client to really discuss and figure out. The integration of the CVA means that if there's an unforeseen circumstance, by integrating an NUCC, which again is confirming that there's been some kind of issue, and providing proof, then you guys kind of in advance agree that you're willing to remedy those issues by either an extension of some sort, be it contingencies, closing, or a mutual cancellation where both parties are protected. Okay, we're good there? Cool. So now let's talk a little bit more about what's working. What's working now? Okay, we got a little bit of time left, right? We're good. Cool. So let's talk about what's working. And I will say that for me, especially during these times, buyer letters couldn't be more important. And who has an absolutely incredible buyer's letter? Mr. Julio here. So I'm going to let you kind of speak to this, man, and how you leverage this, especially given the times.
Sure. So just so you know, guys, giving it all out to you, we're using the company or the platform called Canva, C-A-N-V-A, to design a lot of our stuff. And, you know, my assistant, Rosie, does a great job for that. And this just kind of breaks it up a little bit, right? Because a normal thing might be just an email or a regular letterhead. But, you know, the picture is always important. You know, when we're walking through these homes and I'm seeing my clients just falling in love, I'm looking for them to somehow resonate with the sellers, you know, whether it's the same sports teams, whether it's, you know, kids, dog types, whatever it is. And then we're throwing it into this. And this breaks it up so that first we let the seller know why it is that their home is the one for the buyers, what it is that they loved, pointing out the things maybe even sometimes that other buyers would use as an excuse to get out of a transaction later. So it's, you know, things of good and bad of what we saw and what we love. And then the about us, again, is the part where we're tugging at like, hey, you work for, you know, you're a CHP, so am I. I'm over here. You know, again, not pointing out everybody's personal business, but at the same point, making some connections. So the about us, you know, comes from different ways, whether like in this example, you know, we're from Temecula. Just because we're purchasing, you know, in one area doesn't mean you couldn't mention something else. You just may never know what chord you're going to strike. And then lastly, about, you know, the agents. So I'm writing this, or I'm helping my clients come up with the first paragraph and coming up with the bullet points for me as we get to know each other through our first couple of days of showing, or even first few weeks of showing. I share this at the buyer consultation so they can start thinking about it. And at the end, I'm also, you know, putting in a little bit about us and what they've experienced with us up to that point. And if we're in a contingent situation, you know, making sure that the seller and the agent, because you know the listing agent's reading it, lets them know that we're committed, of course, to make this thing be as great as possible. And so if it does get presented straight to the seller, it kind of gives them that, hey, when we looked at all the offers, what about those agents, Julio and Jeanette, that really made some effort to tell you that they're going to be great to work with, or maybe even you'd be very surprised. I've actually just closed with a buyer who was actually the seller of a home I represented a buyer. So she called me to help her buy a home after closing her transaction. And it had to do with this letter. She just said, it was awesome that you went out and above for your clients, but in addition to that, you made me feel comfortable that, you were giving me in writing what we could expect with working with you. And that just, fold all three ways comes better to me. And if it doesn't to you, that's fine. Because I do hear a lot about how agents are not even sharing letters, but at least this effort has been made, and you just never know whose chord you're going to strike, the agents in a good way and or the sellers in a good way. So that's why I do it.
This is brilliant.
Yeah.
It really is. This is absolutely brilliant in a lot of ways. I mean, think about it. Julio kind of in advance is having his buyers be thoughtful about the value they add. And then you're still in the process where you can add on even more and confirm them and prove them right. The other interesting part is you're probably hearing from your buyers like what their hopes are of what this will look like. So you know how to exceed those expectations and really build connections with them on the long haul. So this is absolutely brilliant. Let me ask you a question, Julio, briefly. How do you present this offer via email? Do you have separate attachments or is it all together? How do you do it?
Me personally, because of whether the size of the email would kind of work, not in my favor, depending on what's going on. So what I've done in the past is altered it depending on the situation. If I am, let's say, for example, I don't have proof of funds, right? We talked about that yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So then essentially I'm sending in the RPA with the approval letter. I'm introducing the lender on that specific email, copying them and telling the listing agent they're welcome to talk to the lender directly, and that if they did want to require that we showed additional finances, that he has that, so that way I can cut down on those extra attachments and I can get the letter in there. Other times I have even, if I haven't gotten a chance to put the letter together, I will let the agent know, especially if they're not trying to present that same day, that the sellers and I are working on putting together a letter, and we'll send that separately. But if I could at all times, all together, if possible, I will sometimes even do a zip of everything, but then attach everything, as one, what's it called? Again, I'm all about just trying to make sure it fits in that email. But ideally, all of it into one email is ideal.
So I'm going to give you my opinion on that. And I'm going to give you something that might be a huge game changer for you, Julio, and everyone else. So number one, I like to put everything in one PDF when possible, right? Like if you need additional funds later, that's fine. Because I love how you do that, making sure that there's an integration, almost a purpose for the lender and the listing agent to communicate. That's a huge win, by the way. Mm-hmm. But whenever possible, if I can stack everything on one PDF, I absolutely do it every single time. My concern is a listing agent will go, some stupid buyer letter. I'm not going to print that thing because I'm running low on ink or I don't have enough paper. I don't care that much. I want to make sure everything's one PDF, especially right now when people might be using a software like the one we're on right here to go over offers with their client. They're going to open the PDF and what appears? This letter, first things first. Now, if you're running into a problem where we have all these extra addenda and maybe you put in the SBSA with your offer as well as the MCA and you have the coronavirus addendum and you have like 50 pages in your offer, it can happen. I get it. Especially if you're doing like a DU. A huge game changer is a website called smallpdf.com. Smallpdf.com. That thing's amazing because it can convert like a PowerPoint to a PDF or a PDF to a PowerPoint. It does a lot of cool things. Smallpdf.com, you do not need an account if you're only going to use it. I think it's like once every hour or something like that. But if you have this big PDF, you run it through smallpdf.com, you don't need an account, and it'll minimize it, usually like 70% of the size. And I've never heard anyone having an issue opening it on the other end. So small PDF could make sure that even if you have this huge, huge offer that's signed digitally by different places and there's all these overlays, therefore the size gets bigger, small PDF will minimize that thing big time. It should fit on any email account, not only to send it, but for the other party to receive. So that could be a game changer for everybody. And there again, if you need to convert a PDF to a PowerPoint or vice versa, the whole 9 yards, that website can do it all. Cool. All right.
Love that.
Julio, you are brilliant in the ability to understand, given the dynamics of a market, how, oh, you know what? And we're right at time. So we're going to fly through this a little bit, but how to leverage things beyond price. Okay. So I'm going to kind of let you speak to this for the most part and then just dive in. So
sure. Again, setting expectations with your client and figuring out what route you're going to go. Right now, everybody's playing games differently. And I think as I'm starting to work with these different agents out there, I'm finding out that the way they go about it usually has to do with their own digesting this information, digesting the process, and then putting that on the seller as opposed to making sure the seller knows all their options. So you have people over offering, and then of course you have people under offering or offering what they really want to offer, and things are just getting, out of hand in every direction. So guiding your client on how to set precedent on your offer is important from the beginning. And so are you going to work with one route or the other route? Or are you going to play the game of trying to go all routes? And so I'll tell you an example. Last night, had a call with somebody where we wrote a 305 offer. I looked at comps. The neighbor just sold for 310. And it's like a unique situation. And so the offer's getting to 345. I got no counter, but I text the agent, hey, just following up on our offer from yesterday. How are things looking? I know you're presenting today. And she told me 345 is where it's getting to. And, I was just like, oh my God. So I went back to my clients and I said, hey guys, I know you're approved at 350. Here's where it's getting. And I had to explain to them, like, this is just how out of hand it's getting. So we are actually writing the offer at 345 because I've educated them on the fact that, one, if we get another counter, or if we actually get a counter and they tighten contingencies on us, or they even say no contingencies on us, then we know that it's not the house for them because they're just not in a position to pay the difference and, not in a position to lose money on inspections and appraisal. We're kind of tight on that end. So again, guys, making sure that in your buyer consultations and while you're looking at the home and you're running comps, that you give them these options of how to play the game. Because at the end of the day, you gotta make sure you're never walking away from a non-accepted offer feeling like you did something wrong. Do your professional due diligence to tell them what's going on. Let them know how the market's affected by everything right now with low inventory, and make sure they understand. That will also save you from them walking out on you if you don't get 2 or 3 offers accepted, because it's going to happen right now. So if you're looking for ways, tighten up contingencies in advance. Again, as we mentioned yesterday, the loan is supposed to go to 17 days at the end of this fall anyhow on the contract. If that all stays in play, work with your lenders and get things done. Make sure you're getting DU approvals, not just pre-approvals. And of course, if you could remove your contingencies based on your buyer's loan and situation, do that. If you can, if the appraisal, if you're getting it accepted or you're writing an offer right around where it should appraise at and you're comfortable, of course, do that as well. If you can get the external, appraisal only because your buyer's putting a good amount down, treat it like a cash. Don't ask for an appraisal. One of the ones that I've kind of worked with buyers who have the money is offering appraised value plus additional $5K on top of that. I know it's free money your client's giving away, but at the end of the day, some seller may say, I'd rather guarantee myself $5,000 over the appraised value than to have somebody over offer me and then try to drop it on me later. So again, just, play it out as asking the listing agent, which would you think your client would prefer? 5K guaranteed or, me over offer and then we renegotiate. And then lastly, we mentioned earlier the 7 days or sooner for possession. Again, thinking that, at some point it could close on a day that doesn't work for the seller and it gives them more than enough time. So set that expectations with your buyers.
Yeah. So here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to have John jump in here because we want to be respectful of people's time. But if you guys are willing to stick around for 10 more minutes after that, me and Julio can kind of dive into a couple other things before we completely wrap. But John, to give people a closure based on the time frame, I wanted to give you the floor, my friend.
All right. So pretty much what I wanted to do too, as you guys are breaking down and showing some of the cool things that you are doing in order to get offers accepted. I know that I've shared this with the two of you guys, but First of all, if either Joe or Julio, you guys can just make sure that on my screen you can see where it says the Barrett family.
We do.
Okay, so this is one of the things that we've done is that we were put into a position where we're helping the client sell a property and buy a property. The home that they wanted to buy, I mean, literally the client was in tears just saying, this is my home. This is my, my family. We prayed over it. This is it. And do everything that you guys can to figure out how to get me this property. And in short, we collectively as a team got together. We're like, how do we make this work? So this is what we came up with. We came up with this really cool visual. And we do this in we'll call it like partnership, sponsorship with a lending team that we work with at Easy Fundings. But the cool thing is that it allows us to, like Joe mentioned, put all the details into one clean PDF. First of all, visually, it's just stunning, right? Like right away, take the image of the actual property itself, and then we have a table of contents, and then we give the specifics. If you look on the right side, says our offer. It's really meant to be straightforward, like real simple, easy to understand for the listing agent. And then in addition to that, we also have a form of our own letter as well. You'll see on the screen here under the photo where it says click here to watch their video, because that's actually a hyperlink. So if somebody's looking at it online, then they can hyperlink to an actual video message. And then this is where the RPA goes. So we have the RPA included there, and then we have details on the financing itself. So we want to make sure that they're able to easily look and feel a little bit more comfortable with the lender that we're working with. So we have the client scores, down payment, what type of loan program, and then we have insight on the team themselves. So this is where you should just work a little bit more efficiently with your team members to see what we can do in order to stand out. DUs included, as well as insight on their proof of funds, as well as their credit scores. And then also we put on the right side, in the event that the property is being sold, well, we want to make them feel a sense of confidence in the property that's being sold. Now, if the property is already under contract, even better, but sometimes we've submitted offers without even having the property under contract, which you guys all know that's challenging, right? And in short, we ended up getting our client's offer accepted in 4 days. There was 12 offers. We were the only contingent deal countered. And subsequently, we figured if this is working, why stop it? The following week, we ended up putting 4 buyers into escrow as well. So now it's been a part of our strategic process. And then also it's important for you guys to sell yourselves as well as professional real estate agents. Make sure that people know and understand they are working with a true professional. And so it needs to go further and above and beyond just what we say, how we interact with our fellow agents, but also we want to be able to showcase. And so as you're looking at the visuals, it is something that is of a visual standout for sure. And then the last thing I wanted to show you is I want to show you the actual screen or the video example. You might not be able to hear the video example, but here's the example that we included with our offer. And this is the Barrett family for the offer that we submitted.
Hi, I'm Francina. I'm Patrick. And we just want to say we really love your home and we hope that you consider us. We have 3 kids and 2 dogs, and we would love to make that our forever home.
After being in the Army for 8 years, we believe that this house is the perfect fit for us. We can envision raising our kids in this house and making it our forever home. So I really hope that you consider our offer. We'll be strong buyers, and we look forward to making your house our own.
Thank you.
So the cool thing about that is that the buyers themselves, the husband is one, he doesn't really showcase a ton of emotion. So we had fun with it as we're recording him. It was 100 degrees that day. I'm recording him with my cell phone. And I'm even like, all right, let's do it again. But Patrick, calm down. You're just being a little too excited, which actually made him feel more comfortable because he wasn't excited at all. So his wife was just laughing with it. They had a great time. But when we submit our offers, real estate agents have responded extremely positively. And in fact, most of them ask, hey, how do you guys do this? And how could we go about it? So if any of you have any interest in learning more about how we could help your offer stand out, in the comment box, just type out your name or, put a little hands up emoji, and then we'll make sure that we reach out to you guys. But I know Joe, Julio, I've shown you guys these things, and we've collaborated to figure out how we could always enhance the value that we bring our prospects. So I do have questions from the audience. So you guys let me know when you are ready so we could fire off some questions to the two of you.
Let's do it.
First thing I gotta say is, man.
That's next level stuff. I've never seen that before, John.
Yeah, that is awesome.
And actually, John, before we dive into some Q&A, real quick, I just want to kind of in closing, while you're queuing up some of the questions, I'm going to share my screen again really briefly. Number one, I know that this is true of Julio as well, but we are definitely open to communicating with our fellow practitioners out there in the world. If there's a dynamic or a scenario you want to get with me or Julio about, or John, don't hesitate. Like, we love building relationships with our coworkers out there. You know, the more relationships that we have, the better for our business. I know that's absolutely true of me. Julio, you're highly respected in this industry, and it helps your clients. Like, people get that now. I think your clients understand that. I'm working with an agent who's highly respected in the industry, and most agents know that he's a fair, honest broker of what he does. That helps your clients get more deals done. And so we want to build those relationships with you guys. We also really encourage you guys, read your contracts like at least once a month. Take a quick review, read a paragraph, refresh it. You know, things change, and it's sometimes we don't look at this stuff for a while and we kind of forget some of the nuance. Read it. It'll help you tremendously. Figure out how to implement some of the things that we discussed over these 2 days as early as you can in your process, and call the car legal helpline as much as, or the hotline as much as you can, when you see even issues brewing, or you're like, hey, we averted a bullet there, but I wonder if it would have played out that way, what would it look like? Get on the phone and call them. It is absolutely worth your career. It's worth your development, and you're really going to start to crystallize how these things navigate should they go into more of a more challenging problem. Anything else you want to add on that, Julio, before we start answering questions?
No. Again, if we don't get a chance, thank you so much for letting me be part of this. This is awesome.
Likewise. John, let's do it. Let's answer some questions.
All right, guys, I got a question from Linda Castellano, and she says, if you close a transaction and something should have been disclosed by the seller, but they did not, is there any recourse for the buyer? For example, referring back to Julio, what if they were never told that they couldn't park on the street?
Yeah, those are those things where, you know, as much as we want to help our client through every single step of the process, this is probably where we talk about, you know, you're going to have to seek, sorry, I'm blanking now.
Legal counsel?
Legal counsel, yes,
Yeah.
legal counsel, because, you know, as much as I like to make things right myself, it's just out of my power. I've gotten calls from agents after the fact, like, you know, one time a house being sold and they found mold after the fact. You know, that's where I just kind of, again, don't even bother my seller with it. I take control of the situation and say, hey, look, I know it's a bad position to be in. We didn't know about it. If you know, tell your client and they want to take legal action, we completely understand. But just so you know, Mr. Agent, you might want to share with them this, this, and that. And I shared the pages of the contract where they signed and said that they did all their inspections, and that's really it. So legal counsel is definitely the way to go on something like that. If in that scenario that I found out about the street after the fact, again, I would have went that route, and I would have even called the agent. Just if my clients, just so happens this specific example, my client is that client on that specific example is a police officer and a nurse. So, you know, I would probably tell them this is kind of that gray area in which, you know, he's very used to on his job. And I would have probably called the agent and said, hey, heads up. I don't know if you knew, if you didn't know, but moving forward on your next offer or your next deal in Covina, you should know this. And then, you know, depending on my client's reaction to it, I would, you know, help them in any way that I could. But at the same time, I'm very, you know, got to be very standoffish a little bit in the sense of what I'm willing to do. But I would bring it to the listing agent's attention and make them aware of it.
Okay.
Agreed. I'm going to add one more thing just so everyone's clear. Like, when it comes to after the fact in a transaction, just know it gets really interesting. And this is why legal counsel is important, because there are triggers or milestones that need to be met. Like, there's a burden of proof there. Like, you have to know that the seller didn't disclose because they intentionally wanted to deceive you, and that they did know, in fact, of whatever that issue was. So that's definitely, you're spot on, Julio. That's where we really need to get legal counsel involved at that aspect.
All right, guys, great insight there. We do have another question here from Margaret Kosman. Messed up on her name, and that's my sister-in-law. And she wants to know, can you skip mediation and go straight to arbitration? And then do you guys have any insight on the cost and how that works?
So my understanding is if both parties agree to mediation and arbitration, then they should go through those routes. If someone wants to skip it, is it possible? To be frank with you, I don't know. I think that if they try to skip it and there's additional legal costs there, they might be called to the carpet because they're again breaching the contract that they signed. So I don't know the answer to that one, to be frank. Maybe Julio may.
No, I want to send you a high five through the screen. I think the first thing is the fact we don't know is because we've probably never been to that extent of it. And then the other thing is it just makes me think, okay, that's another level I got to get to. I need to find out from an attorney, from the calling card legal, what happens in those situations, because I don't know. It hasn't gone to that point. I think knowing the contract, the first wall, the first line of defense I have is knowing this contract well enough that I don't even get there.
I will state this: when the deposit is 10,000 or less and small claims is available, I know that's a route that a lot of people go and don't go to the mediation and arbitration. And then if I may, I'm going to give you guys my just real quick opinion on that. And again, this is not legal advice. This is an opinion. If you are the buyer trying to get the EMD back and it's 10 grand or less, try to go to small claims. If you're the seller in that same regard, try not to. Only because from experiences of others, and this is not some kind of hard line thing or legal advice, but from what I've seen play out from other agents that have had to go that route, often small claims courts are not interested in the contract. You're in a small claims court where there's people ahead and behind you, and it's like, stand up. All right, what's the problem? Tried to buy the house and I couldn't because my loan fell through and the seller's being mean. And they go, seller, what do you have to say? Hey, we were in escrow for all this time and they never did X, Y, and Z. Hey, you know what? It sounds like you're being a jerk. Just give them their money back. Next. Like, that's literally how people have described small claims courts. So when you're going to mediation and arbitration, you're going to be involved with people who understand the real estate contract and will likely want to review the process in which you've been on your transaction. That's going to speak way more to what actually played out versus tell me your side, here's a decision. So not legal advice, but that's just my 2 cents on it.
No, and I support that 100%.
The one thing that I can tell you guys is that in the event, let's just say that the document is signed by both parties to go to mediation and arbitration. If one party chooses to not go to mediation, that they would immediately then go to arbitration, and the ruling there is then binding. So then if one party doesn't end up going to arbitration, they don't state their claim, well, then now that's binding, and it could be enforced by the actual court itself. So it's kind of one of those things where they can go to mediation, but then at that time, if one party's not happy, they could say, nah, yeah, don't want to deal with it. And so then arbitration would be the next step anyway. So I do have a little bit just to offer on that end.
No, I love it. And I think a lot of people don't even know the difference between the two. So thank you for spelling that out, John.
No worries. Okay. Do both forms need to be signed up front, referring to the CVA and NUCC? Confused on what needs to be included in the initial RPA?
Great question. So the CVA, if you're going to integrate that into the contract, it doesn't even have to be signed at the time of the contract. We just recommend that it does if you want it involved, because that's when people are agreeing to things, right? It could be implemented midway through a transaction. That's possible. But there again, like any other addendum, are you going to get it signed by both parties is the question. It's always easier to get everything signed when we're agreeing to everything out of the gate. In that dynamic, the only document you need is the coronavirus addendum. And that basically spells out that both parties are giving cover to each other if there's an unforeseen circumstance that happens. If there is a problem and it's coronavirus related, that's when both the CVA and the NUCC are provided. And then, so what's going to happen is the NUCC is spelling out the issue, giving proof, and then the coronavirus addendum with section 4 and 5 filled out is where you're identifying what the remedy will be because of the problem.
Okay. Cool. And I just want to add there too, we have a transaction that's currently in the works where the seller has opted to just stop the sales transaction, not allowing the appraisal to be completed. He's chosen to no longer sell. And it's because he said that he's been affected by coronavirus. So we called CAR legal. The first question that they asked is if the CVA was signed. The CAR attorney went on to say, even had it been signed, there's a burden of proof on him to show that he was significantly impacted. It's not a get out of sale your home card. And so the form was not signed. And so from all the parties that we've spoken to, they said indeed that this is something that could fully be enforced by the court that the seller has no recourse for them to cancel the transaction. Fortunately, the agent as well as the broker is in full support of what we've brought to the case here. So now it's just a matter of playing it out, mediation, arbitration, and then seeing where we go from there. So that's just important to know that even if you do have that form signed, there's going to be some burden of proof according to CAR attorney in order to show that you've been significantly impacted and now you can't proceed and move forward with that sale. All right, guys. Well, I don't have any other questions. So with that being said, if there was anything else you guys wanted to add, otherwise, Aaron Quas said, this is gold. Thank you so much. Larry Olsch was just mentioning great idea on Julio's letter. Daniel Sandoval's talking about how CAR has now become his best friend. So he's probably referring to just Colin. And Linda had shared that she had almost lost out on a transaction because of the form itself. Or I'm sorry, Deborah Pampa had said that she almost lost a deal because the seller agent did not understand the process of utilizing that CVA form as well. So definitely important to make sure that your clients feel a sense of confidence in you and the value that you're bringing. Thank you, Carol, for acknowledging the great information. These guys are absolute rock stars in the business. There's no question about it. You guys are just so thorough in your explanations. And I do feel that even though we've spent over 2 hours going over this, we're moving quickly and we're moving at a fast pace. And like you had mentioned, Joe, we could have spent over 2 hours just on one page all in itself. So if you guys enjoy this type of information that's being shared by these professionals, definitely let us know. This is, I think, the first time that we've done this virtually. Before we've done this in class, but we haven't had the opportunity to do so because of what's going on. So we haven't been able to have our live classroom session. So if there's anything else that you guys would like insight on, let us know. Otherwise, I'm going to pass on over closing words to you guys. And thank you very much to the Easy Fundings team for sponsoring this session with us. No representative is on, as I mentioned to them. I'll give them the shout out. Maybe the two of you guys both work with Easy Fundings as well. Maybe you can give them a shout out as well. And I just said, go out, do your loans. It's end of the month. And then we'll let us do the waving of the flag and just letting people know how great you guys are.
Thank you. I'll go first if that's okay. Shout out to Easy Fundings. I'll tell you why I use Easy Fundings, and that was because getting the first opportunity to see they were human, to see that they were real, to see that I had the chance to know that in them I can see myself with how they treat my clients. So all in all, it just makes it that much easier when someone's treating my clients the way I'm treating them. And so, yes, thank you so much, Easy Fundings, for helping us put this together and supporting my transactions, of course. And then again, guys, while you're out there, learn this stuff so you can be that, that person that's a couple steps ahead. And I'm not saying that I'm trying to be better than the other agent in that kind of way. I'm trying to use information not only to grow myself, but to grow the other person, because the truth is we all work at different brokerages. It's just the name of the game. But I honestly, I share this, being full transparent. I honestly don't see other people as my competition. Even if I'm walking in and walking out of a door, it's about that client getting the best service possible. Now, if I walk out the door and see somebody who I know isn't giving great service, I don't walk into that appointment saying, oh, that guy you just had, that girl you just had, don't do it for this and this reason. I don't even mention you. I go in there and let them know what I bring to the table, what I do differently. And at the end of the day, I say that because I want you to know that that's how I walk into this business, how I walked into this business, and how I continue to work in it is pumping up everybody in the business, because we do have a great opportunity to help people, exceed expectations of theirs and make good money at it. And so, with that being said, I know my worth. And so when I walk into that, and I know that, I can speak positively on every scenario and never have to downplay another agent. So use this information to be able to do the same if you can. Speak highly about yourself, speak highly about those you work with, and of course, be a practitioner of the business, because that's what we need to be. Thank you so much.
Julio, that's exactly why I respect you so much. That was incredible. And we kind of started this out yesterday by sharing with everyone, we have different approaches. And it's not just Julio and I. There's a lot of different people out there that understand the contract and leverage it in different ways to accomplish the same goal. And that's representing their clients to the best of their ability. When an agent can do that, I have nothing but admiration and respect. And then I try to understand how maybe they tweak their approach different. And maybe that'll make sense for me and my clients at some point as well. So that's really the goal in understanding the contract on those levels. I want to shout out to Easy Fundings as well. I mean, from the company owner to their relationship with John and social networks to their incredible loan officers and my closing sisters that I work so closely with. There's just a ton of value add there. So I would encourage everyone to understand how you could be a party to what they have to offer as an agent and up your game as well. Even if it's just continuing to come on trainings like this. So just know that they're available and they're very value driven. That's like John's middle name. So I want to just say that I'm super grateful to be here. Again, I want to build relationships with other agents. It helps my business. It's good to have a lot of friends and colleagues that have mutual respect out there. So if I can help in any way, I know it's true for Julio. It's definitely true for John. Certainly let us know. And to Julio specifically, thank you again for the tremendous honor, my friend. It's always appreciated. So thank you guys. We really appreciate you taking the extra time to stay on with us.
Thank you so much.
John, floor is yours, bud.
We are done. We appreciate it. Thanks so much. We're going to have this recorded. We're going to have it uploaded online. I've had so many people ask about a recorded presentation, so you guys feel free to let everyone know. We'll put it on our website, and we're going to call this training to a conclusion. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Be safe out there, guys. Thank you.
Take care.